Howdy Neighbors, David here. And today on Boondock Stallions, I'm introducing you to my new segment called Friendly Fire. And the reason I'm calling it Friendly Fire is because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about nothing but maybe the negatives and things that went wrong in the sequel trilogy. And while I'm doing that, I don't want anybody to think that I'm being negative or hateful or just, oh, he's just stubborn and unwilling to accept new things, because I'm not. I love all things Star Wars. I love the sequel trilogy, maybe not as much as I love the originals or the prequels, but I love it for what it is, even though they made huge mistakes. And the whole purpose of this channel is to promote a safe environment for friendly and not so friendly talk about things that we love. Like, we can love all of Star Wars, every single thing, and still admit that there are bad aspects of what we love. Like, I love all of the Star Wars movies. Rise of Skywalker is my least favorite, and I own the Christmas special, well, the holiday special from 1977 or 78, or the one George Lucas hates. But the whole point is to promote a place where we can talk about these things without any kind of actual negativity. I mean, yes, I'm going to be saying a lot of negative things, but I don't mean them to be hateful. I mean it to be blunt, constructive criticism. And we as people should be able to accept blunt, constructive criticism. I love it. I've gotten, oh man, there haven't really been much in the comments here on the channel, but if y'all are on my Facebook page and all, I get so much hate for some of my theories and ideas, and it's so funny because I love all of them. I mean, even when you think you're insulting me, I like it. It's really good, and it's like I said, it's constructive criticism, and these are just opinions. I know you're not going to agree with every single thing that I say. I'm just putting them out there to see if I have any friends, any feelers, anybody that can, take a step back, think about my words, and then react without just lashing out with negativity and whatnot. So, having said that, let's tear apart the sequel trilogy. Now, I'm a big fan, and this is, once again, very divisive, very, very divisive with the sequel trilogy. It has split Star Wars fans in a way that I didn't think was going to be even more possible than the prequel trilogy did. Man, did that divide us. But here with the sequels, nobody really divided until we got to The Last Jedi, and I'll get to why that happened here in a little bit. But let's start with The Force Awakens. Now, Disney played it safe. Disney played it so safe with The Force Awakens. What they did was they cherry-picked the best bits of A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Last Jedi, and kind of crammed them into one with a bit more action and an awesome, awesome score, as always, by John Williams. But they played it very safe. I really love The Force Awakens. I thought it, like I said, yes, it was a bit of a safe play, and it was everything that I loved about Star Wars, but more importantly, it was Star Wars. It was new Star Wars. I knew that a lot of people were going to hate on it because Disney put it out. But I mean, let's take a look at that before I even delve into The Force Awakens. A lot of people were upset that George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney, or sold, I'm sorry, all of Lucasfilm to Disney. But honestly, that made the most logical sense for him, seeing as how he built Star Wars by whoring out all of his merchandise and everything. He whored out the movies, he whored out the comics, he whored out the holiday special for a little bit because he needed the money. He whored out every single bit of his franchise that he could to make the money to continue to make more of them. And who is better at whoring out their merchandise than George Lucas? Disney. So selling to Disney, he knew would work, and Disney is a corporation and they understand fan service and how to run this business the right way, or so he thought. So it did, in fact, make a lot of sense at first when he did it. So having said that, The Force Awakens had so many setups and so little payoffs. Actually, you know what? Let's start with one of the most annoying setups in the first of the sequel trilogy that got the worst payoff. FN 2187. That's right, Finn. Finn got one of the worst setups and payoffs ever. We start off in The Force Awakens finding out that Finn, as a child, was taken away from his family by the First Order to be raised as a clone trooper with one thing and one purpose in mind, which I know everybody thought, oh my god, that is horrible, but honestly, that's exactly what the Jedi did throughout the galaxy for about 1,000 years before Palpatine wiped them out. So it's not really that bad, or if you want to say it is that bad, then you need to get on board with the Jedi were kind of bad, and I'll get to that later. But, you know, Finn's taken away from his family, raised by the First Order, and then you get to find out in The Rise of Skywalker that Lando had been looking for his child that was taken by the First Order when he was young, while he was away, and raised to be a stormtrooper. And I'm not trying to play the race card, but I mean, first of all, there are two positive black male characters in the galaxy. One of them is a child who was taken from his family at a young age and is searching for his family. The other is a man whose child was taken from him at a young age and he is seeking his child. And you could easily have made that your "I'm your father" moment. Because let's face it, Lando could have pulled off the "I'm your father" line to Finn had that been the case, but it wasn't the case. It was actually that other stormtrooper who'd deserted and become a freedom fighter or whatever she was, Janna, in The Rise of Skywalker. They made Janna Lando's daughter, but they didn't even do it in the movie. You have to go read the books to find out that Janna is Lando's daughter, and it should have been Finn, but that's just one of the setups that didn't pay off. Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. Oh my god, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber and his hand being at Maz Kanata's. Well, I mean, the hand wasn't at Maz Kanata's, but Maz Kanata said that's a story for another time. We still haven't gotten that story, and we've finished off the whole sequel trilogy and a few spin-off movies, and Disney Plus is on the second season of The Mandalorian, and we still don't know how that happened. But I do have a theory as to what did happen with that, and I'll get to that here in just a few minutes. So another thing that split the fans apart was Reys Identity. Now, I was all for the whole Rey is no one aspect of it, and let me explain why. Because aesthetically, that made the most sense. Now, I know that because of special effects and limited budget, the movies were made 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3 later. But imagine, if you will, that it had gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If the movies had in fact been made linear, then you would have started the Phantom Menace without knowing that you were supposed to be watching Anakin Skywalker's rise to greatness and fall to the dark side. You would have absolutely no clue that that was going to happen. So Anakin would have in fact been no one, a slave on a desert planet out in the boondocks of the galaxy. Do you like that little name drop there with the boondocks? Thank you. But he was no one. Anakin Skywalker was no one. And due to a series of awesome and unfortunate events, Lemony Snicket's, he rose and fell to the dark side. And I think that would have worked had they started with 1 through 6. But like I said, ideally, Anakin was no one and became one of the greatest figures in history throughout the galaxy. Now, Luke's backstory in The Force Awakens. I was okay with what they did in The Force Awakens, making it as vague as possible. The reveals could have come later in episodes 8 and 9, but my whole idea on the backstory that Han didn't elaborate on in The Force Awakens was that Luke had gone out, gotten married to Mara Jade, started his Jedi Academy, had a child, and that child was Rey, and Rey and Kylo knew each other, or Rey and Ben Solo, I'm sorry, knew each other while Ben was one of Luke's students, and Rey was still just a youngling, a Padawan nonetheless, because that would have, Rey being Luke's Padawan while she was a little kid would have explained her seemingly supernatural ability to use the Force in Episode 7. I mean, her first run out, she's able to force pull the lightsaber to her, ignite it, and stand off against Kylo Ren. It would have been like muscle memory. She wouldn't have known where the powers came from. It would have just been something she learned as a child that helped her out as an adult. But I digress. That was going to be the first seed in Kylo Ren's redemption story. And when I say that, my thoughts on it were Snoke had seduced him to the dark side, and he turned on Luke and the Jedi Order. So it seems like Snoke would have said something like Palpatine would have said, and I mean, since Snoke technically was Palpatine, which I hate, and I'll explain more on that later, I imagined that Snoke would have said something like, wipe out all of your Jedi and your aunt and your uncle and your cousin, and then you'll be strong enough with the dark side to follow in Darth Vader's footsteps. You'll be just as great and powerful, even more so, than your grandfather. And my thoughts, Ben would have done it. He would have killed everybody there, but because he and his little cousin, did have a relationship, a friendship, he betrayed his master's orders, which is very in line with the Skywalkers anyways. Anakin loved to betray his master, whether it was Obi-Wan or Palpatine. He didn't mind breaking rules and direct orders. So then he would have taken her aboard Luke's ship and dropped her off on Jakku, well out of range, or at least so he would have thought, of Snoke being able to sense her. Now, I say took Luke's ship because the ship that Rey sees in her flashback leaving her on Jakku looks exactly like Luke Skywalker's ship in an old Luke Skywalker adventure comic book. And so Kylo Ren, having left her there on Jakku, flash forward to The Force Awakens when Rey's an adult and sneaks off in the Millennium Falcon with BB-8 and FN-2187. Kylo Ren was like, what girl? He was visually upset and got his lightsaber and smashed all the screens in that console. And everybody was like, oh, he's just throwing a temper tantrum. But he wasn't just throwing a temper tantrum. He was lashing out of fear because he knew in the bottom of his heart that the girl that had helped FN-2187 and the droid escape was his cousin that he hid on this planet to keep away from Snoke. And now Snoke was going to find her and realize that Kylo Ren had been lying to him the entire time. And that would have been seed number 1 for the redemption arc for Kylo Ren. So the second redemption arc seed for Kylo Ren came in the form of him killing Han Solo. Now, I would have loved to have found out later on that he's not the one that ignited the lightsaber. My thoughts were that Han ignited the lightsaber. If you remember the scene, Kylo Ren says, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Will you help me? And Han says, yes. But imagine, if you will, Han knew that Snoke was going to kill Kylo Ren once Kylo Ren had done and served his purpose. As soon as Snoke didn't need him anymore, he would kill him and find a newer, younger apprentice and continue the cycle as with Palpatine and Vader and Luke. That was what he was trying to do. And Han knew this, so by Han shooting first, / igniting the lightsaber for Kylo Ren, he would have taken the opportunity away from Kylo Ren to kill him. He's robbed him of the opportunity to fully fall to the dark side. I know I pull from the Harry Potter series a lot, but here I'm going to pull from there again. Now, in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Professor Dumbledore is murdered by Professor Snape at the end of the book. Then you flash forward to the Deathly Hallows and you're going through Snape's memories and you come to find out that Dumbledore was already dying. He had already been dying the minute his hand was cursed by that ring, and Snape had saved his hand well enough that he would have lasted about a year anyways. So Dumbledore was going to die. He'd already had a death sentence on him. Now, Voldemort had ordered Draco to kill Dumbledore. And if Draco didn't kill Dumbledore, Voldemort was going to murder Draco and his entire family. There was no backing out. Draco had to do this. And you find out that Dumbledore asked Snape to kill him instead of letting Malfoy kill him. And the reason behind that is because had Malfoy in fact killed Dumbledore, it would have split his soul and he would have fallen down the dark path and gone along and even further become a Death Eater, and there would have been no redeeming him. And Dumbledore wouldn't allow that to happen to Malfoy, so he asked Snape to kill him instead. And even Snape was like, no, what'll that do to my soul, Dumbledore? And Dumbledore said, it's a mercy killing, you should be fine. And so I applied that logic to Han Solo not wanting his son to fall completely to the dark side, ignites the lightsaber, thus throwing himself on his own sword, and dies. I mean, you saw him die. He put his hand on his son's face. It was like he was saying, I love you and everything is going to be okay. And that would have torn Kylo Ren apart, because on the one hand, he wanted to embrace the dark side. He wanted to fully be greater than his grandfather ever was, and Han Solo just saved him, an act of absolute pure love. Ugh, sorry, my throat's going a little dry. Now, this theory, I got excited about that whole theory when I saw the beginning of The Last Jedi, because Kylo Ren was chasing down Leia's ship. He had it locked and loaded on his screen. All he had to do was pull the trigger and his mother would have been dead, but he couldn't do it, which furthered my fuel that I was on the right track with my whole Han pulled the trigger on the lightsaber thing. And Kylo didn't kill his mom, and then the two TIE fighters took her out anyways. Here's another thing that divided the fandom. Everybody hated that. Okay, now this is why it bothered me, because when The Force Awakens came out, everybody was like, oh my god, they can't come up with anything original. All they did was rip off the original Star Wars trilogy and try to pass it off as something new with just a bigger Death Star. I want something new. I want something new. I want something new, and I want it now. And then they go and give us The Last Jedi, and it's so new and different that everybody's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't say I wanted it all that different. I wanted it different, but the same. Can you make it different but the same? Do you understand? And no, nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about. So everybody hated Leia flying through space. And let me talk about that for just a second. Leia wasn't Mary Poppins flying through space. First of all, she was in space. There's no gravity. There's no up. There's no down. There's no left. There's no right. She could have been going this way. She could have been going that way. She could have been going that way. She could have struck the pose. There's nothing to it. It's like they have a mind of their own sometimes. I really don't know. Anyways, there was no way. So they just decided to show her right side up with her hand reaching, because that's what she was doing, reaching for the ship. And y'all were like, oh, she's like Mary Poppins. But if she put her other hand out, you'd have been like, oh, she's Superman. Or both hands behind her back. Oh, she's Superman again. There was just no pleasing the fans with that one. Y'all just wanted to complain. So enough with that whole Leia and whatnot. Now let's talk about why The Last Jedi failed. The Last Jedi failed. I mean, it was a commercial success, but critically, everybody hated it, and I'll tell you why. You know whose fault it is? It's my fault. It is my fault. It is your fault. It is your fault. It is your fault. It's all of our faults. It's every fan of Star Wars' fault. And here's why. It's because we spent 2 years theorizing about how the movie was supposed to go. We spent 2 years between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi making decisions for Disney and Lucasfilm that were never going to happen. We said Luke needs to do this, the lightsaber needs to be there, Maz Kanata needs to say this, Rey's parents have to be Luke, Snoke has to be this has to be that, this has to be that, and there was no way they were ever going to please any of us. And so the director, in a brave and bold move, decided, you know what? I'm just going to subvert everyone's expectations because I'm never going to be able to please you anyways. And it was fine. I loved The Last Jedi. It was different. It was new. And yet it was still Star Wars. And so, let's talk about Luke's character. Here's another divisive thing. Everybody hated Luke's character in The Last Jedi. Everybody was just like, how could you do that? That is so disrespectful for you to betray Luke Skywalker's character. He was a great Jedi warrior. He was supposed to be this. He was supposed to be that. And you've gone and disrespected him here. If y'all could just show me on the doll where Lucasfilm hurt your childhood, then we can start the healing process. You know what? He didn't ruin your childhood. He didn't ruin anyone's childhood. All Rian Johnson did was make his own movie about Luke Skywalker and the way it should have gone. And to be fair, Luke didn't do anything out of character for who he was supposed to be in that sequel trilogy. Luke Skywalker the Great was the original trilogy. We watched him rise and go on to do great things. But let's look at what happened. Luke, at the height of his Jedi career, had new students, had a new academy, had everything going for him, and had risen to a new height for the Jedi. And once again, in that arrogance, allowed the dark side to rise up from within its own ranks, destroy the Jedi Academy that he just rebuilt, and went into exile. That's exactly what Yoda did. That is exactly what Obi-Wan did. And that is exactly what Luke did. And so it just followed suit that he was just doing what every other great Grand Master Jedi had done before him after losing everything that they'd worked so hard to build. He exiled himself and didn't want to do it again. And you know, people hated that Luke portrayed or painted the Jedi as the villains, and if you think about it, they really, really were the most arrogant police force that the galaxy had. They, in their arrogance, allowed the Sith to come back and pollute every single branch of the government so that they could manipulate it into controlling it and wiping the Jedi out completely. Fail. Obi-Wan completely failed in his training of Anakin. Fail. But that's not really Obi-Wan's failure. Obi-Wan didn't know that he was getting private lessons from Palpatine, which would go against what the Jedi were teaching Anakin, and once again, fail. Here's where people that hate The Last Jedi are going to climb on the bandwagon with me. So Rose Tico. I hate Rose Tico. Now, I'm sure the actress Kelly Marie Tran is a fine actress, but I don't like the character. I don't like what she did with the character. I thought the whole Cantabite thing was completely unnecessary, and I feel like the whole Rose saving Finn at the end while Finn was saving others because he loved them, but she loved him, was contradictory. It was like, what? Like, you literally stopped him from doing what you just did for him? Like, so I was a little upset with that. Having said that, though, and I mean, I hate Rose Tico. The only thing that probably could have saved Rose is if she pulled off her hair, revealing that it was a wig and that she was Ken Jeong from Community the entire time. Would have been fine, but it didn't happen because I'm an asshole. And so then we get to The Rise of Skywalker, and she has 76 seconds of screen time. 76 seconds of screen time. That is awful. And I mean awful, awful, because what it means is that Disney allowed bullying to win. Disney allowed them to be bullied by bullying. You see, the fans hated Kelly Marie Tran's character so much that they bullied her off of social media. She had to shut down Facebook and Twitter and Instagram because of all of the backlash from her character. I mean, I wasn't part of it. I didn't like her. I just kept it to myself. But they bullied her off of social media, and that was garbage. What's more garbage is that because of that, Disney gave her 76 seconds of screen time in the next movie, claiming, well, we put her in a lot of scenes with Princess Leia that didn't really work, and so that's why her role seemed diminished. And no, that's just an excuse. That's an even worse excuse. You're trying to pawn it off on Carrie Fisher. And let's talk about that for a second, shall we? I love Carrie Fisher and was completely devastated by her death, but they did not need to put her in The Last Jedi. She could have died in a comic book series. She could have died in a novel. She could have died in the opening crawl to the movie. And no, they just decided to recreate her using a bunch of deleted scenes and footage from the past two movies. And while on paper that sounds like a great idea, the reality of it was garbage. I hated every moment that she was on screen because, first of all, she wasn't looking at anybody and nobody could make eye-line contact with her or vice versa through the entire thing because she wasn't actually physically there. Second of all, you could easily tell that all of the dialogue being fed to her was forced by the actors to make it work around her pre-existing dialogue and video recordings. I mean, it was so forced, it was ridiculous. I mean, they should have just, like I said, left her out and let her go in a novel or a comic, and it would have been a little bit more dignified than what they did in the movie. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, but this is just my opinion and how I feel about it. And I've loved Carrie Fisher since the beginning. I love all of her work outside of the Star Wars movies. I love that she was one of the strongest feminists to have ever emerged out of the 60s and 70s. She was awesome. And so they should have not put her into that movie. Now, let's talk about Rey. Now, I know I previously said in the earlier part of the video that I would have liked her to have been the offspring of Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade, making her a cousin to Ben Solo, but I also have another theory that could have worked out just as well. So in The Last Jedi, when Rey is in the cave, she sees a vision of herself mirrored innumerably. There are so many copies of her going forward and going backwards, and then she goes to the mirror, stands in front of it, and asks who her parents are, and you see those two figures emerge in the shadows, and then as they're approaching her, they kind of merge into one, and you really don't find it reflects herself. And my thought on that was, what if Rey's a clone? What if Rey is a clone? Rey is the first clone in an entire batch of Force-sensitive clones, because since Palpatine is Snoke, we know that Palpatine would have been looking for a Force-sensitive body to take his essence in, so creating Rey from the DNA extracted from either Luke's hand or even extracted from Anakin while Anakin was on the table being turned into the half-cyborg Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith. He had Skywalker DNA at his disposal. He had his own DNA at his disposal, and he had all of Kamino at his disposal for cloning. So making a hybrid clone of one of the Skywalkers and Palpatine to be an ultimate vessel to carry his essence in, which also could be a little bit explanatory for the Baby Yoda, or why he would have wanted to have cloned Yoda's species, because Yoda's species is infinitely more powerful than him, and to take on its body might have given him the longevity that he desired. And so that would have been a great way for Rey to have been a clone. And you might be asking yourself, well, David, where would all these clones, other clones of Rey, go? The answer is with Palpatine. You see, in Rise of Skywalker, my theory was all of those red stormtroopers were going to take off their helmets and reveal themselves to be Force-sensitive clone troopers made from Rey. So Rey would have essentially been kind of the Boba Fett of the group, meaning that she was an unaltered, untampered with clone that didn't have any of the genetic modifications to make it more docile and less independent than its original host. It would have just been a pure clone to grow as it was, and the other ones would have been like drones, but stormtroopers with Force abilities. And honestly, I liked that theory as well, and it didn't play out. Now, speaking of clones and Snoke and Palpatine, my issue is this. My issue is, in The Rise of Skywalker, you get to see all these little Snokes in jars kind of thing, and they're pickled Snokes. If y'all watch Mr. H reviews, pickled Snokes are awesome. But you've got all these Snokes in jars, and the only explanation you get for it is, I created Snoke. Alright, like, is that all? Like, what did you create him from? Is he a clone of somebody? Is he a copy clone of somebody? Is he just some random experiment you were working on in the lab? No answers. And the whole time, it should have been Darth Plagueis. And like I said, Kylo Ren and Hux were talking to Plagueis, or to Snoke, very visually the way the cover of the Darth Plagueis novel looks when Plagueis is talking to Palpatine. And so Snoke being Plagueis and having tricked Palpatine into thinking that he was dead and been alive and hiding in the shadows would have been an amazing thought the whole time. And I even subscribe to the Darth Jar Jar theory, and I know it's crazy. If you've never seen the video, I'll leave a card up there for you to click on. But the Darth Jar Jar theory would have even come out to play with Palpatine the whole time. I mean, they were both from Naboo. They were both allegedly supposed to have been Force sensitive. I mean, it's been confirmed that Jar Jar should have been revealed as the villain in Attack of the Clones instead of Count Dooku. Like, that whole fight between Yoda and Dooku should have been Yoda and Jar Jar after Jar Jar revealed that he was in fact the apprentice. And like I said, George Lucas feels like the movies should mirror each other. They should kind of rhyme. And in The Empire Strikes Back, we meet Yoda as this annoying, simple, dumb and fumbling creature, only to later be revealed that he was one of the greatest Jedi warriors of all time, taking from the book The Art of War that you must act the fool to get to know your enemy. And that was what Yoda did in Empire Strikes Back, and what George Lucas was trying to have Jar Jar do in the prequels, but it never played out. And because of the backlash from The Phantom Menace, he backed out of it and created Count Dooku kind of on the fly. And since we're talking about clones, I feel like General Hux should have been the clone of Palpatine that we all deserved. I mean, in The Force Awakens, when he's giving his speech to all of the stormtroopers about taking down the New Republic and restoring the First Order and the Empire, the whole time he was giving that speech, it was very reminiscent of Palpatine giving his speeches in Revenge of the Sith. And so my thoughts were that General Hux was going to actually turn out to be a clone of Palpatine the whole time, and would have also been a very much better direction to take the character than what they did in the movies. Like, I hated the way they killed him. I hated the fact that he was the one that turned on Kylo Ren and turned him in and betrayed him, and thought that they could have handled that character a lot better. So, Rey Palpatine. Let's talk about that. Okay, before we get into the Rey Palpatine aspect of it, let's talk about where my theory for Rey's lineage was going to go. As I said before, I thought it would have been a great idea if Rey was no one, and at the end of Rise of Skywalker, she takes on the last name Skywalker, but my whole theory on that was that she should have done that, but Skywalker should have been the new name for her new order of Jedi. Like, seeing that the Jedi Order failed and the Sith failed because there was no balance between them, instead of creating gray Jedis, Rey could have taken the theory behind being a gray Jedi and applied it to her new order of students and called them all Skywalkers in honor of Luke and Anakin and Leia, because they were all in fact Skywalkers. And I mean, it worked for Jesus. I mean, that's how Christianity, Christ, Skywalker, and that way Disney could have stepped away from the whole wars between the Sith and the Jedi and let that die with the 9 movies in the Skywalker saga, and then fast forwarded maybe 50 or 100 or even 1,000 years later, after Rey has rebuilt the Order, and we could see where the Skywalkers have evolved into since then. And all of her students would have taken on the name Skywalker as well. It would have been Rey Skywalker, Finn Skywalker, Broom Boy Skywalker. They were all Skywalkers. And so, I mean, they could still go that route in later movies to the story, because a lot of people are talking about the Baby Yoda and how that's going to play out, but let's look at it like this. The Baby Yoda has been introduced as a baby for a very specific reason. By introducing him as a baby, you get to show his origins and fall in love with the character, so that when he is no longer a part of the Mandalorian and goes off to complete whatever training or whatever they have for him in the future, you can flash forward a couple of 100 years in and see what he has grown into. It's actually a very good way to have him start off as a baby. That way you've got a bit of an emotional anchor and somebody you're familiar with when they start a new saga and introduce this character as an adult in the storyline. The Rise of Skywalker had too many fake deaths. Now, I love all of the characters in Star Wars except for Rose Tico and that little goblin thing next to Jabba I couldn't fucking stand. But having said that, you're on the final installment of a saga series, and so a lot of people needed to die. Chewbacca's death should have happened. I mean, I love Chewbacca, but there was so much emotion, there was so much power in the accidental death of Chewbacca, and then it's like, nope, haha, he was on a ship that you didn't notice because it was off screen in the background somewhere, and people don't turn their heads in the Star Wars universe to be like, oh, there was a ship just over there. I mean, come on. 3PO. 3PO was a significant death, but oh, guess what? R2-D2 has his memory back up, and that's bullshit, because if R2 could give him his memory back then, why couldn't R2 have given him his memory back after they wiped it at the end of Revenge of the Sith, before they led into the events of A New Hope? Riddle me that, Lucasfilm. Riddle me that. Let's see. False deaths. Oh, Ahsoka. Alright, let's talk about Ahsoka. Now, a lot of people are sticking with the idea that Ahsoka is dead because you hear her talking to Rey when Rey is talking to all of the dead Jedi at the end of the movie. But my thoughts on that were, what if she's just talking to her using the Force? I mean, we saw Palpatine talk to Anakin using the Force in Revenge of the Sith, and we saw Vader talking to Luke using the Force in The Empire Strikes Back. So why couldn't Ahsoka be using this exact same Force ability to talk to Rey in The Rise of Skywalker? A lot of people hated the end of Rise of Skywalker when they showed up at the Lars homestead, but my theory on that is, because a lot of people are like, oh no, Rey's gone to live on that planet alone, blah, 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 in isolation. But no, what if she's going back to the Lars homestead to start her new academy? She's going to start small. She uses that place as her base of operations, and it's very desolate. It's very remote. It's away from everything, so she could train her new Jedi / Skywalkers in peace. Okay, so here's another thing. Relationships in the Star Wars universe. Now, I know everybody was divided on the whole Reylo situation and had their cousin theory thing worked out. That kiss would have been awkward and inappropriate, but I mean, it's not like we haven't had awkward and inappropriate kisses in the Star Wars universe before. But a relationship, and I know before anybody gets mad at me for talking about gay relationships in movies, I know that everybody wants representation, and I'm bisexual and I'm all pro gay LGBT community members, and not trying to be homophobic or anything like that, but I felt like the lesbian kiss at the end of The Rise of Skywalker was very forced and awkward and out of place because we didn't really know these two characters or anything about them. If they were going to put a gay relationship into the movie, it should have been Finn and Poe Dameron. And the reason I say that Poe and Finn should have been a couple is because there were so many setups. I mean, yes, there was a very obvious bromance going on between them, but in the deleted scenes for The Last Jedi, you find out that Poe had in fact taken his jacket that he'd given to Finn and sewed it back together for him and gave it to him. It was a very soft and tender moment, and I think would have furthered the undertone that the two of them had romantic feelings for each other. And I know it's very popular to kind of shove gay relationships and LGBT community members into movies, and I'm not a fan. I feel like if we want representation, that we should go out and get it ourselves. We shouldn't expect others to do it for us. That's why I started my own channel. I wanted more chubby brown bisexuals on YouTube, and here I am, a chubby brown bisexual on YouTube. And so I feel like, and even the two actors that played Finn and Poe said that they had intended for the two characters to be a romantic item, but that Disney went with the lesbian couple instead. And I feel like it would have meant more and been more real and had more meaning and a deeper impact if it had been Poe and Finn, because we love the two characters and it would have been a nice way to bring them together.